Good morning and welcome to Greenstep Sustainability Morning. My name is Tanskanen. I am Head of Sustainability Services at Greenstep. I'm going to share this morning with you. Thank you all for joining us. In this event, we focus on sustainability as an integral part of any successful corporate strategy. We've got a great set of speakers here on stage with us today. Teir, Nebahat Albayrak, Arja Suominen and Anssi Vanjoki. We encourage you to send us questions during this event by using the chat. Later in this event, we'll discuss the questions with all of our speakers. We also encourage you to join the discussion on social media by using the hashtags GreenstepMorning and hashtag sustainability. Now first on stage, we have our founder, Greenstep's very own Teir. Teir is going to share his views on Greenstep's own sustainability, as well as our new sustainability services, which I am going to dive a bit deeper into later on. Now, without further ado, please welcome Teir.
So good morning, everybody, and very much welcome on my behalf also to this event. We're really happy that so many of you have decided to join us for this morning session. I will just briefly touch on a few things what we do at Greenstep now in the beginning. For us, we feel that all of the companies and the organization around the world and also here in our home country Finland should act now. We should start taking decisive actions in the climate area and also overall in the corporate social responsibility area. Many of us have already done a lot of progress in this area, and I know many good stories already coming up. And I think this is something that we will see so much more of already moving. I'm very happy for that. Focusing on the ecological improvements as well as more broadly speaking on the corporate social responsibility programs is something close to our heart here at Greenstep. We really want to make a difference in all what we do and also to be a good and inspiring example in this area. Our journey in this field so far, among other things, have been that we have appointed our very own head of sustainability to forcefully drive improvements. We have also started our non-profit company called Greenstep, which is a company that wants to help people that for some reason have had difficulties to integrate into the work society, to help them become part of the work society and be a good contributor overall then to the society. We also invest in startups. We have some more than 20 shareholdings in growth companies, and the filter is very much around sustainability. We have a few examples here. Jepli is a bike service company, very much active in Finland and in Germany at the moment and expanding rapidly to new markets. And Jepli helps us all keep the bikes in shape so we can commute biking. Nordtreat is a company which produces fire retardants for wood products, helping us build more with wood, even high-rising complexes. And then finally Venner, which is on a mission to help us eat more healthy, more ecologically, while at the same time helping families that are in need. And now finally we have lately also then formed our own sustainability consulting team. It has been really amazing to see that we have been able to draw some top talent to our team and we have a sizable team already built and ready to do our part in helping our client companies then to form their own sustainability strategies and also to act accordingly. So this topic and this morning is very close to my heart personally and also to all the Greensteppers, and I'm happy to open now the further presentations, and Ella, thank you.
Thank you, Tore. It is always really heartwarming to hear you. Thank you. Okay, I'm very excited about our next speaker, Nebahat Albayrak, a sustainability leader with extensive experience. She served in the Dutch government for almost 20 years, being elected as member of the parliament at the age of 29. She also served as Secretary of State for Justice for 4 years. As she transferred to corporate world, she helped driving the clean energy transition at Royal Dutch Shell. Now, earlier this year, she was appointed Senior Vice President, Corporate Affairs, Safety and Sustainability at Fortum, and a member of Fortum's executive management. Her unique combination of diplomacy and willpower has led to sustainable solutions in critical areas. Now warmly welcome Nebahat Albayrak.
Paljon kiitoksia, Ella. And hyvää huomenta to everyone in Finland and everyone who's connecting through digital channels. Good morning. I want to thank Greenstep to start with for inviting me over here today, as this is actually my first ever external event in Finland. And in case you're wondering, yes, we are settling in quite finely, albeit with some funny experiences already in this country. And Teir will, I guess, forgive me for sharing one, which involves him. So when he invited us over a couple of weeks ago to his place, his message literally read through WhatsApp, "Maybe we can smoke something together." Now, I know the Netherlands has a reputation, right? But you can imagine that this made me think twice about the intentions of Teir. So luckily now I know that here in Finland, you smoke your own fish. So, coming to Finland, totally excited about that anecdote. I have to remember to move my own slides here. So going back to the topic indeed, sustainability has many faces and is a very, very wide and widely discussed topic. And there are many lenses you can use when looking at sustainability. And I want to focus here today on the increasing relevance for business results and business outcomes. I wanted to start with this. So given that you're, I think, a well-informed audience, you may know Peter Bakker, who is the CEO and president of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development in Switzerland, based in Switzerland, but globally active. And in this quote, I think he brings exactly the edge that I want in the room. He says, there's now almost 3,000 listed companies that have set net zero targets or comparable science-based targets around their emissions. So that will make you say, pretty good. But then he continues that the World Business Council's assessment is that less than 15% of these companies have actual operating plans in place to deliver. Less than 15%, and I think that's pretty serious. So why is this relevant to me? And I want to go back to us moving to Finland. You see here a picture collage of our move. This is exactly 4 weeks ago. So what made me at the age of 52, with my career and background, decide to convince my husband Robin, my 10-year-old daughter Sarah, and to pick up our 2 cats to move to Finland? Well, there are predominantly 2 reasons. One is indeed all about the Fortum strategy, the company that approached me. I'll say a little bit more about this, but I want to start with another reason. So when Fortum approached me, I started reading into Fortum's role in society and about the Nordics in general. And I was totally fascinated by how already for decades the Nordics are delivering the evidence that you can combine economic growth and human progress with lower emissions year on year. And I was like, why don't I know about this? You know, I'm not living that far away. I wasn't living that far away in the Netherlands. So what are the Nordic companies doing that is actually well on its way to solve maybe the biggest challenge that our planet is facing? So more specifically about Fortum's strategy then, I read this and I thought this is a credible strategy. And everything in me said, I want to help by being part of the leadership and the management of that company to make this come true. Why is it credible? I mean, if you look at it in short, the ambition to transform our own operations to carbon neutral. You know, looking deeper into what do they mean? You know, how exactly are they planning to do this? Secondly, strengthen and grow in CO2-free power generation. Now, that's the silver bullet that everybody's looking for. But again, I saw in Fortum a company that was well on its way to think about how this can be achieved in a fast and nimble way. And then leverage the strong position in gas to enable the energy transition. And this is all about Fortum having acquired the majority of shares of Uniper, a Germany-based important company. It's quite big, but it's big in gas, and it's also still big in coal. And that coal strategy, again, was fascinating to me to see what do you do with that. We know that switching from coal to gas is one of the fastest levers we have today to make the energy transition happen faster. But of course, I mean, there's so much more technologies developing around us that also are relevant for Fortum. And then lastly, partner with the industrial and infrastructure customers is all about how do we help others to decarbonize. And so I thought this is credible, this is achievable, and given the size of the company and its strategy, I think this can be achieved. So I wanted to be part of that change. A month into my job, well, actually 2 months, I started the 1st of June, we had our the quarterly results, or first half of the year results, shared with the world last week. And I was pleased to see, and I'm going to say honestly, I mean, I've just joined, so none of this is yet my doing. But I see a determined execution of the transformation strategy. I want to point at two things here. One is a very determined path of divestments of portfolio assets that are not that relevant anymore for the future strategy. So Stockholm Exergy, the Baltic district heating business, and some of our solar power in India, divested and then generating 5.2 billion. That's significant because this is indeed as much about investment as it is about indeed what you sell off. And in combination with those divestments in the last year and a half, indeed a accelerated decarbonization with evidence and proof points that were made public. Firstly, in Russia, well on our way to have an end to our coal-fired generation in 2022. That's next year already. And then acceleration of our coal exit through the Uniper assets, which was already in the planning for Uniper, driven by regulations, etc. But that acceleration, as you can see in this chart, in the last year and a half, as part of Fortum Group's strategy, is a fact in Germany, in the UK. And this means balancing growth. And to me, it is all about balancing growth. It's about delivering the credible returns to keep investors and shareholders with you while you are decarbonizing, and maybe more and more because you are decarbonizing your business. I won't dwell on this slide for a long time. It's really, I mean, some of you may be well informed about taxonomy. it's a chic word to basically say classification. And the EU has been working for a long time already on taxonomy for the European economies to classify economic activities that they see as credibly reducing emissions and having a positive environmental impact. So for Fortum, it shortly means that most of our business in hydro, wind, hydrogen, biomass, nuclear, solar, CCS, and hazardous waste is already aligned. You know, we can check the requirements of the EU and say, yes, these economic activities can be classified as indeed addressing climate change and sustainable. But we have still a way to go when it comes to our gas businesses and nuclear, because the EU has not made its mind up yet about taxonomy for those sectors. And we're expecting that any moment, probably in the second half of this year. You see also that Fortum's growth CAPEX predominantly goes to renewables, then hydrogen and clean gas, environmental and security of supply, and some other activities like indeed the venturing capital that we have, and innovation and digitalization. Now, I've been telling why this is very relevant to me. This was what made me come to Finland. Why should it be relevant to you? You know, when I was approached, it was early in the year. And already then, also because of my job in Shell, which is a company I appreciate a lot, it has a big global role to play in helping to drive the energy transition. And it has a strategy in doing that. So it was already quite obvious to me that there's a sense of urgency that nobody can deny. But since I said yes to Fortum, there have been two milestones that I want to pull out here. One is indeed the EU has now further deepened its activities in regulating the whole space for climate change, helping to deliver their Green Deal, Green Recovery package, and the Europe Fit for 55 package that was very recently presented, shows us indeed that taxonomy is now further embedded, and it's now broadened to so all EU regulations are broadening to all sectors. So this is beyond energy. It is about agriculture, aviation, transportation. It's about this basically all activities in the economy are covered by it. So the EU is further on top of this and getting really serious about driving this with high pace. Second, and this was only 2 weeks ago, where the International Panel for Climate Change came out with what has been received as its most important product so far. So they assessed 14,000 scientific reports about climate change and came to a couple of very sobering conclusions, which one is that actually it's undeniable now with what they have brought as evidence that human activity drives global warmth. And that some of the impact of that is irreversible, unfortunately, like the rise of the water levels, the ocean levels. I don't know about you, but when I grew up, I thought floodings that are devastating with human lives lost were happening in Bangladesh. That was my very vivid memory. You know, it was, and I thought, you know, what a pity. It's the geography that these people live in, their economies, their governments, their governance. I never thought that in my life I would experience that in the heartland of Europe we would have floods and floodings because of climate change that make people die in Germany, in Belgium. I never thought that in my lifetime I would see the temperature rise within Europe, Sicily to be very precise, to 48.8 degrees. This is not only happening, it's happening so much faster than we all anticipated. And the IPCC says some of it can be reversed if we manage to indeed deliver the plans that all these 3,000 plus companies and governments have pledged to. And if we do that, we can stabilize at 1.5 degrees. In this slide, as you see, it's the blue line basically where if we manage to deliver the plans, we can stabilize at 1.5 degrees. It's almost a fact. It is a fact, according to the IPCC, that we will reach that temperature rise. But we can avoid that steep red curve, as you see in this one, which would take us, if we don't do anything about it, to actually about 4 and plus degrees global warmth. So net zero commitments are expanding, which is the good news, but stakeholders now are calling for real action. So all of this is putting more pressure on everybody, especially politicians and regulators. But it's not just the regulators. As you see here, I mean, this is a picture where we see the commitments, which looks pretty good. So from GDP and population perspective, vast majorities have already said we're committed to do something about this problem. And the regulatory framework, I'm not even going to go through this. By the way, I will share my slides with you so you can read it at your own pace. But what this says, it is very complex. It is going to get more complex. On the EU taxonomy to my left here, but in the middle, the financial reporting and the non-financial reporting are getting more and more complex. But they're also, I mean, they're getting more demanding. You know, so the whole measurement, reporting, and verification is going to be regulated. So, in my own words, if you have a purpose and you made that promise, there's actually nowhere to hide anymore, because this is here now and it's getting stronger and stronger. Stakeholders' expectations, many stakeholders here. I want to call out 3 of them. You can see here, I looked at who are the key stakeholders that influence our business results, and of course there are governments, NGOs, more and more the judiciary, consumers, capital markets, investors. But the 3 I want to spend a couple of minutes more on are actually these 3. So investors, let me just pull out only that 37 trillion in assets that are now committed to deliver the outcomes that the world so desperately needs. And investors will need to see proof to manage their financial risk. So investors will be looking for evidence of companies who are actually doing as they say. The judiciary, 2 very important and I think quite groundbreaking developments here. You could call them, I mean, more activist judges, but one is indeed in Heathrow, the airport in the UK. The airport was stopped from expanding because it did not take into account the climate impacts. And second, a more recent one is the Shell court case in the Netherlands, where judges basically said you are violating human rights through your business activities. And they said that before to the Dutch government, and now it was directed to a company. So we're yet to see where that goes and whether that verdict stands. But I think it's a cutting edge of what the world can expect. This is all stakeholders are firming up here. Then, last here, I mean, the capital markets, proof for cost of capital, that we already see that the cost of capital now is higher for those companies who have the lowest ESG, so environmental, social, and governance scoring already. So you see the cost of capital going up for those companies who cannot deliver the evidence, and the credit ratings are also being impacted. Well, I'm coming to an end here, and I want to wrap up again once going back to the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And this is again a quote from them, where they say, if you position your company well, so if you indeed not just think, I have a good purpose, I am committed and I'm going to tell the world that I really want to do this. No, it's if you position your company well by being able to truly integrate ESG in a standardized materiality-based way into your performance measurement, then you will see that capital markets will reward you by giving you a lower cost of capital. So I want you to stop, pause, and think about this now. And the question I would like to leave everyone in the room with, if you have a role to play in the company finance indeed, is that you ask yourselves, how are you reflecting the ESG risk in your total risk assessment? And how much of that are you already translating into your annual report? So if you don't feel uneasy at this point, I clearly have failed. If you have a role to play in these companies, I hope you feel the edge, and I hope you sense the call for action, and that you're not a bystander, you're a player in this, as we all are. Thank you.
Thank you, Nebahat. There was definitely food for thought for all of us. Now, our next speaker, Arja Suominen, is a far-reaching strategic thinker and seasoned communications and sustainability leader. She has over 25 years of experience in Finnair and Nokia. Arja strongly believes that communications and sustainability are the key activities when driving change and building a sustainable future of any company. During the planning process of this event, Arja and Greenstep found a common path. And now I'm very proud to present her as a senior advisor of our sustainability services team. Without further ado, please welcome Arja.
Thank you, Ella. Good morning on my behalf as well, and thank you, Nebahat. I think that that set the ground for my presentation, which is going to focus a bit more on practical communications matters, as I started my career as a teacher, so can't get rid of that. So very important in my mind is that you have the strategy, as we talked just recently in the previous presentation, and that you have your business plans. But it's equally important to position yourself in the world and in the eyes of people so that they know you. So I'm going to talk about sustainability as a cornerstone of reputation building. And first, I would like you to think about a company that has a really bad reputation. If you were here, I would ask you to name those companies, but now I just sort of wanted you to think about this matter. And what happened is that in most of the cases, these companies did something wrong, and they didn't communicate about themselves before their bad actions. So they failed in sustainability. And that's a very bad position to be in, because it takes years to rebuild then the reputation. I think that we have great example, unfortunately, here in Finland recently, Vastaamo, for example. Nobody knew about the company before. Suddenly they were in the headlines, and then suddenly they went bankrupt. And that bankruptcy shows that reputation truly matters. What about company with no reputation? I mean, you are still doing okay. You are executing all the ESGs and reporting, and you think you are doing okay. That's good, of course, but you are still in the dangerous position, because that's a position where you can start building your reputation, on the other hand, and head towards something great. But you're also in a position that if something bad happens, so a small hiccup in your process, something like that, so suddenly you are in the club of bad companies with bad reputations. So it's a ticking time bomb, and you need to fix it by communicating. And then there are companies that we all love. I mean, we know that they have their faults, and we know that occasionally there are small hiccups and so on, but we sort of trust that these companies do deliver, and that they fix things, that they aim for good, they want to do something good, and if something sort of negative happens, they will sort out the things. And it is always in these difficult times when companies' sort of integrity is measured. You have to handle those well. One company that I very deeply loved was Nokia, and still, of course, is. And I always thought that the mission that we had, connecting people, was something bigger, and therefore it connected people, because it told that our aim was to bring wealth and prosperity to different countries, make people more connected and more empowered. And it was a great mission in my mind. And yes, I mean, there were certainly many hiccups, but many of us still have sort of warm feelings towards Nokia. So in that case, in that sense, I think it's a great example about company that you can love. Today, I mean, we all love Vatsel's chocolates and Marimekko dresses and so on. There are plenty of good examples in our domestic fields as well. So, you have to build your reputation, and while you build it, you also have to measure it, and reputation can be measured. And I have borrowed here a chart from T-Media, which is one of these measuring companies in Finland, and many companies use them to measure their reputation. These figures here are just illustrative. I've taken it from their website and they don't tell anything. But this sort of goes through the elements of reputation. So the company, of course, needs to have good governance. That's sort of the skeleton of the company that makes your integrity to stand out. So you know how you perform, what are the processes, and how the company works. And you follow those rules. Responsibility as an item is one of the 8 core elements of the reputation as well. So what do we do on the responsibility side, and how do we talk about it, and so on. Workplace, what kind of employer you are, is also very important. And I claim that if you are not responsible, you have to pay more to get good people, and you have still very difficult to get those in the company because they keep asking, why would I join? The only mission to join, of course, is to improve the reputation of the company then and make the company better from inside. But not every person is interested in that one. They just say, no, I go to the companies that already have a good reputation. So this is very important to pay attention to. Products and services are also very important. So you need to have good products and services that are built in a sustainable way. And then, of course, you need to build a great brand. Anssi Vanjoki, who we'll talk a little bit later on, is one of the great brand builders. And I do remember that in very early, in 1980s, we did a survey about different company brands in Germany, because Nokia at that time was a very small one, a very small company. And we wanted to know how it was positioned versus others. And by the way, 3% at that time knew the name, and they thought, some of them thought that we were making cameras, so they mixed us with Nikon. But that was not the point, because there was another company who many people knew, but its reputation was not that good. It was sort of like okay, because people said that, you know, their products are something that everybody uses, but nobody wants to have. And then you don't get premium for your product, premium price. So your reputation can impact on your pricing as well. Financial performance. Nebahat already talked about sustainability having impact on the price of the money. So what kind of loans you can get. And I recently read that if insurance company here in Finland in the future is going to price even insurances based on how sustainable you are, because the risk for the insurance company is higher if you are not sustainable. And I thought that, well, great move here as well. So sustainability impacts almost on everything. And obviously, the buck stops at the leadership. The leadership really needs to believe in sustainability, execute sustainability strategies, make sustainability as part of the whole company action, and they need to communicate about sustainability matters as well in a credible way, so that you know that the speech comes from heart. Innovations are very important. Fortum has great examples on what kind of innovations they have in the energy field, but there are many other great examples in Finland as well. Vaisala, I think, for example, is geared for climate change solution applications and so on, because climate already is a big part of their business. But we all in different companies can innovate and be more sustainable. And last but not least is dialogue. And I didn't color this blue button here. It was colored by T-Media. But I do believe that dialogue is very important, because if the company is not known, if it doesn't openly discuss about good things and things that still need improvement in their companies. So if the company closes, so nobody will know what your values are, what your targets are, and that will impact on your reputation. Just think about Finnish companies. There are many companies who are very actively discussing, and then there are some who think that, well, I mean, we still have so much to do, and maybe we could start communicating later on and so on. But I say that the time to communicate is always now. You need to communicate the steps that you are taking, what are your challenges and how you are going to solve them and how you move them forward. Well, this all takes time. You don't build reputation in a day or two. It's not credible. You can try it, and many companies have tried to rebuild their reputation suddenly. But it's a constant, gradual work. And in my mind, sustainability work and reputation building is based on company values. You have to decide what you stand for. And that's sort of like the how part of the company. And then there's the what part of the company, which is the strategy. So the concrete actions that you're going to take to achieve your business targets, and the business targets are set in that way that they are so feeding into your sustainability strategy. And these together then have a major impact on your corporate culture, which is sort of like the clue in the company, in that way that you don't need to micromanage people and set sort of mini targets to them, but people automatically will follow when they know the big direction, they know that they are empowered to act, and then they will deliver great results as well. And transparency in this work is very important, both internally and externally as well. And this internal part is very important. I started from external communications, but later on I've learned that you always, in a company, have to start from internal communications. Because you need to get your people on board. They need to be believers until before you can get anybody else to become a believer. So it creates a solid ground for the whole company to communicate, and not just certain individuals who are nominated to be spokespersons. So for me, every company representative, every employee is a spokesperson as well. And it means that they need to know what the company is heading to. And by and large, they need to buy the values and strategies of the company. Obviously, we have a little bit different opinions, and we occasionally disagree and so on. But by and large, you have to agree with the company habitus and value, because otherwise you cannot be a credible employee ambassador. And sustainability cannot be an isolated department somewhere with their isolated messages and actions, but it needs to be visible not only in all communications actions, as I've written here, but in all corporate action. So all employees need to think that how does this sort of advance our sustainability mission if we do this and that and so on. What is also very important is that you have to make choices, and that's always the toughest part in personal life or then in corporate life. So you need to decide what is your focus in your activities. In many companies, of course, especially in big companies, you have hundreds of sustainability activities going on. Well, when you start to communicate, you need to think what is relevant for a certain audience and what is relevant for the whole company. And then you focus on those. And yes, you do disappoint many of your colleagues when you say to them that, no, we cannot do this now, we need to focus on these 3 or 4 topics. We'll come back to those later on, or that we will never come back in the big picture to those. But you can talk about those matters to your particular target groups. And communicating the progress, stepwise progress, is very important. We Finns are such that we would like everything to be perfect before we start communicating. And we always are so modest. I mean, this is not really yet ready and so on. But the key thing is that you communicate that you are taking action, you have targets, and you are on your way to reaching them. And therefore, you sort of communicate that you are an active player in the sustainability field. So, what should you do? My advice is that make your company visible. Sustainability, but also communications should be on agenda on every company. And we should not build this sustainability bubble where we sort of are hyping ourselves, but we should make sustainability key part of everything that we do, as I told earlier on. And we should be open to challenges. I mean, there are many target groups that will challenge us. They don't agree with our strategy, with our targets, and so on. And we should discuss with these target groups and learn from them. And we might even occasionally change our opinion. And we certainly need to learn from our failures. I mean, we've paid for the course, so we should learn from it as well and take further action then. And this I think is the great thing in failures, that you always learn something new and next time you will perform better. And like I said, we don't agree, we have different opinions. There are many sort of organizations who are very far-reaching in their sustainability lobbying and so on, and they certainly don't agree with us for their own reasons, and we have to accept that, and we have to discuss, but we also have to defend our view. So we need to explain why did we choose in this way if you think like that. But we can disagree in a friendly way and try to explain where we come from. And then when we make sustainability choices and also communication choices, we need to be courageous. I mean, those steps that when we take them might feel a little bit fearful. So when we then look back, we think, what were we fearing at? You know, we succeeded, or if we didn't, we anyway learned something. And that's very important. So always be brave, move forward. So, what did I do? There are also challenges. As you saw, I can clearly not handle the buttons. And that's how it is also in the real life. You cannot always master everything. And then you need to think, how do you tackle those challenges? And one thing certainly is that sustainability changes over time. Just yesterday, somebody posted me a picture about telefax saying that, hey, can you imagine this ancient device? My kids don't know what it is, and so on. And I then answered that when I started the work, telex was still something that was required by the Helsinki Stock Exchange. I started in '86. And it's the same thing in sustainability. What was sustainable in '86 when I started would not be acceptable at all today. All these, you know, men, women, inclusiveness things, the ways to do trade with Soviet Union, sauna evenings where men went to sauna and women were waiting for them so that the dinner could start and so on. So nothing of that would now be acceptable. But at that time, it felt quite okay. You know, you didn't even question it. And we need to have finger on the pulse and see how the society changes and be a little bit ahead and start doing changes before they are actually required, because the legal requirements will follow, or then the societal requirements, people's sort of attitudes will change so that you will have to change. And you don't want to be a laggard, you want to be a front runner. I already mentioned that sustainability means different things to different people. And we have to accept it. And now I need to actually look at my papers, because I thought that one good example is Elonkorjuu. I don't think that we all agree what they are doing. Extinction Rebellion Finland was the name in English, this action group. But I do think that they make us think, and they challenge us, and they make us sharpen our own opinions, and it could be that we fine-tune something even if we don't agree with them. And I think we should not only tolerate these groups, but we need to welcome them, because they anyway take the discussion forward and take the society forward. Legislation, in my mind, lags always behind. Corporate world is faster, and that's good. But it also then means that sometimes you actually need to adjust when the law finally comes. The things that you've done are maybe not quite what the law will then be, and you have to change, and you have to accept this. But you should not wait the legislation, you just start going, like Ture said earlier on, now it's time to act. And in Talouselämä just 2 weeks ago, I think, Kai Östam was saying that he has a feeling that the corporate world is already, and this was after the IPCC report, that the corporate world is already moving fast, and they are in many things, not in all things, but in many things ahead of governments. And I think that we should maintain that position. We need to be front runners. Then one challenge can be who defines what is the corporate view. This might not be so familiar to Nebahat, but others know the company called Kärkkäinen. So just recently, their owner sent a note to all employees saying that, it's a retail shop, employees saying that you should not get vaccinated, and he's very anti-vaccination. He was very anti-vaccination in his statement. But then the company Kärkkäinen came out with a message and said that, you know, this statement does not represent our views. And how credible is it then afterwards? So we really need to agree beforehand who makes the statements and what kind of statements do we make and what kind of impact they can have then on your business. I thought it was a great communications example, and I will save it in my files. And change takes time, and that's simply something that we have to adapt to. Very key thing is then, and this is closely linked to reporting, how do we measure sustainability and how do we set the targets? How can we find things that are measurables? Because fine talks and communications, it's all fine, but to communicate, you need to have facts to support you. Otherwise, it's just fluffy talk. And I'm not for that. I represent that type of communications where everything starts from values, strategy, facts, and measurements, and then you create the communications message based on that. And here, of course, now that we have this new business, we can help you. To summarize, in my mind, sustainability is part of the corporate soul, because that's how I started my corporate life. So it needs to be internalized so that you don't even need to think what you do. You just sort of act. and you know that this is according to the corporate values and this is not according to the corporate values. You always target to build long-term success. It's so easy to be fascinated with quick things, but they can backfire. So you always have to think about next steps as well. And then it means that progress will happen in baby steps. But babies learn to walk, they learn to run, and they can even become athletes. And our target as corporation, of course, is to become an athlete who can really run. And we need to recognize challenges. So of course, we need to be optimistic, but we also need to think about the challenges, and we need to be prepared for those. And then, like this T-Media example showed, we can measure our reputation progress and take action. So one example from my previous employer, Finnair, when I started there 10 years ago, it was a really difficult period because the aviation had been sort of liberalized, there was competition and so on, and the whole industry had to move. So lots of strikes, lots of bad media and so on. But what we then did was that we decided that we will do things together and we will start to build new kind of Finnair. And based on the measurements, we got significantly up. We are not at 5, which is the maximum. We were not there, but we were a good sort of in top 20 company already. But it took like 10 years and the whole Finnair personnel to work on that. But that was the secret. I think that we got all Finnair people behind that target. It's also very important that when you make these baby steps, that you celebrate the success. It is so empowering and it gives so much sort of satisfaction to people when you celebrate the successes, and it gives you energy to go forward. And then you need to be true to yourself. There are other companies with different strategies. You can of course learn from them, but you need to think whether the same things would fit in your company. And in that way, you then decide, what is me, what is this company, and what kind of image do we have, and what kind of image do we want to have? And then we need a management commitment to head towards that reputation and that image. Thank you. This concludes my lesson today.
Thank you so much, Arja. Now, we as Sustainability Services team should always be courageous and open to new challenges as well. Great to have Arja on board. Now, maybe I could introduce myself again. So, my name is Tanskanen. I'm Head of Sustainability Services at Greenstep. My journey in Greenstep started in 2018 in our financial services team. Then I went forward with our own sustainability work as sustainability officer. And now this year I have been building our new sustainability services team. Sustainability is my passion, and that's where I got my degree from. That's what I do for work, and that's what I do outside work as well in various volunteer positions. Now, you may know Greenstep from financial services or, for example, HR services or CFO services. And you know that we know the financial statement. That's what we are good at. Now, the big question here is, how does climate change affect the financial statement? How can it be seen in the general ledger or in the balance sheet? Now, of course, there are multiple options out there, and depending on the company. But for example, in taxes, cost of capital, cost of insurance, material cost, shipping cost, the revenue, of course, or the fair valuation of assets, the useful life of assets, and so on. And this is because, as we discussed earlier, climate change is not a trend. Unfortunately, it's not something that's just going to pass at some point. It's not just one component of the business environment, but it's actually controlling the business environment. It is setting the boundaries. Now we, as a strategic partner, feel that it is necessary that we understand it. We understand sustainability. The European Union has stated that it should be climate neutral by 2050, and that means reducing greenhouse gas emissions as much as possible and also compensating for any remaining emissions. Now, this is drawing a clear transition path towards that net zero economy. And on that path, there is still great possibility for growth and success. So we want to make sure that our customers are on that path. I want to shed the positive light on all of this, because sustainability shouldn't be just an obligation. Instead, it should be a business opportunity. Because now the world is seeking solutions and the demand is growing. And that's a good sign. Now we ask ourselves, what is needed for sustainable growth? And we came up with this package. Now, this is the beginning of our sustainability services. And as our team members come on board, we continue developing their services to fit our customers' needs. But maybe I should tell a little bit more about our sustainability services. But first and foremost, the team. Now, I am very proud to present our team. We have a great experience, different fields of expertise. We know circular economy, energy management, carbon footprint and handprint life cycle assessment, sustainability strategy, reporting, sustainable supply chains, and so on. So we have Arja, Jenni, Monika, Eva, and Pirja, and myself. And now we are also recruiting a manager on climate and sustainability. This is the dream team, and we want to serve you and help you grow in a sustainable way. Now, in case you haven't really started yet, we have a great workshop for you to provide you a soft landing on sustainability, to provide materiality and tools and metrics to start your sustainability work. Now, financial reporting, links to sustainability reporting, and the CSRD directive is just one example of the policy development that we are expecting from the future. Now, this proposal extends the scope of sustainability reporting requirements to all companies over 250 employees, as well as all listed companies, excluding the micro companies. But as I said earlier, I shouldn't just focus on the obligation, but instead the business opportunity. But this is just representing the requirements that are coming. For those companies who already have their own sustainability team or sustainability manager, we can provide more resources in a flexible way. So we can provide an in-house sustainability manager or specialist, interim basis or part-time basis. What is needed for sustainable growth? As Arja mentioned earlier, good governance is crucial. And that's why we have also the good governance package, as well as the whistleblowing channel and process, as required by the EU directive on whistleblowing. We support our customers by developing more competitive products and services with increased knowledge on environmental impacts to get the data that all the stakeholders are also asking for. And that's why we can help with, for example, carbon footprint or carbon handprint. We believe that whatever strategy is winning in the future, it has to include sustainability. And we want to help you and be your sustainability partner. Thank you. Now going forward, our next speaker, Anssi Vanjoki, is a visionary thinker and seasoned executive with 45 years of experience in global companies and academia. He's currently working as an individual contributor as well as professor in practice at Lappeenranta University of Technology. Many of us know him as part of Nokia's legendary Dream Team in the golden years of Nokia. He has been taking part of the development of the Finnish business community from various board positions. I cannot wait to hear what he will share us this morning. Now, Anssi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning from my part as well. I think I should first merit myself a little bit on why I feel comfortable and competent to speak about the topic of sustainability. So back in 1972, I was actually part of a group that organized the first ever environmental demonstration in Finland. It was not quite like Elokapina because we were not occupying the streets, but we occupied the market square in Helsinki and put some posters with photos of the pollution that was coming from the Finnish paper industry into different lakes. And we had some scientific proof at the time that things will start to look pretty bad in the future if we don't do anything. Then throughout the 1980s, I was working for 3M Corporation, which is a well-known company, if for nothing else from the post-it notes. It's also a chemical company that was polluting a lot of its environment. In that company, I got involved into a program which in 3M terms was a 3P program, meaning pollution prevention pays. It was the first time that I got involved into understanding closed systems, how you actually avoid all spillage, how you avoid wasting material, and how you actually profit from making circular economy in industrial applications become reality. So I got involved in that. Since that, I spent 20 years in progressing digitalization in the world, which I think is, if nothing else, at least a good means for sharing information between all of us about what's going on in the world. And I think without digitalization, we would not be where we are today, understanding what these aspects of sustainability mean for societies, companies, and actually for the mankind. So, what is sustainability? And I actually take a little bit different approach to sustainability than what is the, let's say, maybe the common way of thinking about it, because I start from the company, the firm. And to me, companies, the firm, they need to actually perform sustainably. What that means, it means that you can only exist if you perform well over long periods of time and you renew yourself. What that means is that you become sustainable. And you can only be sustainable if you apply kind of common good in what you do. But we also kind of need to think about what is a purpose of a commercial enterprise. In the Finnish law for corporations, we say that corporations and companies, they need to make a profit. We stipulated in the law that profit is necessary to do. So we can say that the firm's purpose is to make profit if we take this kind of a legal approach to it. On one hand, we can take the only true management guru Peter Drucker and what he said in his time. He said that the only purpose for a commercial enterprise is to get and keep customers, which is in its way absolutely true. You can have the most unbelievable product or service or a combo of those, but if you don't have customers, you have nothing. So you don't exist. Or we can think of, is there kind of like a future purpose for a company? What is it in the future? And there's a lot of academic debate on this one. And I think the winner of this is going to be that the purpose of a firm is the purpose of the firm. That sounds kind of funny, but it means that if you combine things and you try to make a service or a product for somebody where you need those customers, the purpose is the purpose. And it can be anything. We know that with how markets work, you also need to be profitable. But how profitable do you need to be? And can profits come at any means or at any cost? There's a lot to think about that. So profits are necessary, and firms need to be operating with their customers. So for this frame, the companies are governed. There's a board of directors in the structures of the company that actually is the highest decision-making body before the shareholders in their annual shareholders meeting give their verdict on how things have been going. And this board of directors is supposed to ensure that all the regulations, all the laws and other stipulations necessary for the company are followed and obeyed with. This goes to complying. Compliance is a big word in corporate governance, trying to think of all the different regulations that are coming to us to ensure that we actually comply with what is the expectation of the societies that have regulated us with those laws and regulations. In order to comply, you need to do the right things. But it's not enough, because these need to be audited. You have to produce proof by somebody else that you actually complied with what you're supposed to comply with. And the standards of what these compliance requirements are, they are evolving all the time. We already today heard here about the new taxonomy that actually is cross-industry by the EU for everything, and it's going to govern how companies are going to need to behave and take into accordance different aspects of environmental, social, and other areas. We have things like Global Reporting Initiative, a very big system of reporting from public companies in different ways how these environmental and social measures are being taken into accordance. Over the past 30 years, I have served as a board director or a chairman in 17 different companies. Number of those have been publicly traded, globally operating companies, but also small startups and family companies. And when I look at the laws and regulations that are facing independent, whether you're a big public company or a tiny little startup, and what you have to fulfill, there's a lot. And I can honestly say that the board as such in any governance model alone cannot comply and cope with the amount of regulations and laws that are coming across. So therefore, in many companies, there are special departments that actually take care of this, ranging from legal departments to sustainability departments, etc., that always try to make sure that these processes are followed so that the compliance can be met. Is this the right way? Should we regulate the firm, the commercial enterprise? Or should we regulate something else? I think sustainability issues, whether they deal with human rights or whether they deal with social aspects in general, or whether they deal with environment, are not best regulated by regulating the company directly. But actually they are better regulated if you regulate the market. The market is something where many players operate. There's been a lot of talk that capitalism is somehow going wrong. I personally don't think that capitalism is going wrong. It's going right. But the governments and politicians need to understand how to regulate the market. Capitalism, being free, can go terribly wrong. But if it is regulated in a correct way, it can go terribly right. And I actually think that the only way that mankind can survive on this planet is that if we find the ways how we regulate the markets in a way that companies there can perform, where customers and suppliers meet each other under those regulations, and markets actually will save us. It leads into innovation, it leads into reallocation of consumption habits, etc., if we regulate this in a correct way. This is what I think is also the responsibility of the board of directors, to ensure that we give the feedback to the right places, that the regulation should be there where it is most effective and not there where it is easiest done. So what to regulate? We have made big systems like compensation systems. I have nothing against compensation systems. They are a good intermediate step. But it is really funny that if you pollute a lake, you can compensate that by planting trees somewhere else. The pollution happened. The lake was polluted. It's good that there were some trees coming up in some other place, but compensation is not the way to go. The way to go is to actually go there where the problem is the greatest. This can come through regulation, but the best companies are not doing this through regulation, because they are the sustainable companies. They understand that they need to take this into their agenda without any regulation, because they have a foresight that these things will come. And it is always better to be prepared and do the things before it's necessary or stipulated, because then it becomes actually a competitive advantage. And that is what the best companies that are those sustainable companies actually do. A good compass for everybody to try to build up their foresight in those boards, to me, is the UN Global Compact 17 initiatives. For any company that I have been involved with, and I take the Global Compact and I take any element of that, I can always find what it could mean for this particular firm. And then it can lead into action. And it is the responsibility of the board of directors, in my opinion, to ensure that in those companies we are looking at the UN Global Compact and its initiatives in that way, that what does it mean for this company and this market, and how can I actually progress that agenda. Of course, there are some like the human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption that are across any companies everywhere. And those, of course, are something where we need to, in the boards, take particular interest and ensure that we not only comply, but we actually lead with that development. In the governance, one good clause that for some reason, which I don't quite understand, was removed from Google. Google used to be the company that said that do no evil. That was kind of their credo, but you can't find it there anymore. It was removed 2018, if I'm not mistaken. But I think that sentence in a little bit different form could actually work for all companies. It is the job of the board of directors to ensure that there is no evil done, that you always do the good thing and the right thing. This goes into the value base of any company. And it's also the job of the board of directors to ensure that those values are understood and they are defined in any company. And they kind of make sure that this do no evil thinking actually goes through. This will lead, in my opinion, into foresight initiatives, trying to kind of put a radar in front of you that scans the future, the markets, the regulations, the living on this planet in a way that is reflecting back into your business and you can do the right things. This behavior is not yet a norm today, but I believe it will become the norm, or it will have to be the norm, because otherwise, what we used to say in this first environmental demonstration back in 1972, if you don't do anything, we will all drown in shit. That was straight talk at the time of angry teenagers as such. But yes, it also leads into progressing system thinking, because we are living in a system. We don't quite know what the limits of the system are, but we are all living in a system. Every small thing that we do is somehow impacting the system that we live. In those compliances, the reportings and auditing, much of this system thinking it's at least an effort to have it kind of display in there. But what is important, in my opinion, for any company who is trying to act and has to act sustainably is to have targets. If you have targets, you can have measuring. And you should not only measure, like many of these initiatives do, did you do something or not? You should measure the outcome. So both, did you do the thing, how did you do it, and what was the result? All of these things need to be measured. And the more they are made public, the more you have possibility to actually lead with this. That leads into positive differentiation. Positive differentiation is worth a lot of money because your customers will like you. And if you positively differentiate from competition, you will have a chance to charge a premium. At the end, boards can do some things, and they are kind of like overseeing that everything is done right. But of course, there are forces that are more important than that. There are those people who laid down the base capital to start the company. Whether it's today a public company, a small company, or a family company really doesn't matter. But there are people who own the company. Some call them investors, some call them owners, depending a little bit how important they are. But that money that the investors and owners put into these companies, for which they are rightfully so, expecting a return, they possess a lot of power in this. Fortunately, we have seen that markets have taken notice. The problem with some political decision making regulating the financial market, of course, is that policies are decisions made by few, and markets are unbelievable amount of actions done in small pieces by vast amount of decision makers. Vast amount of small decision makers is much more powerful than small amount of decision makers making radical big decisions. Therefore, the understanding of the capital markets and how they are regulated when it comes to the sustainability issues is of prime importance. And Unfortunately, what we are seeing today is that people are issuing green bonds, etc. But when you really dig deeper in there, they are not that green. They are labeled green, but they're not that green. Same thing when it comes to human rights issues and so forth. When you look at some of the portfolios, they don't look like that. The intention is there, and that's good, but a lot needs to happen there. Therefore, my message actually is not so much for you in the audience than it is for the politicians who are making those big decisions that have less impact than the small decisions that all of us as individuals are making, is that they should understand what to regulate. And what they should be regulating is not resources, is not kind of like outcomes, but they should be regulating harms. They should be regulating consumption, things that actually drive the markets. If we regulate those things that drive the markets, then capitalism and market economies will actually work to the benefit of us all. So that's very important. But again, in companies, the board of directors, if they have foresight, they can see that this will be coming, because it will come. After some failures, politicians will see that this is the way to go, and it will come. And therefore, this foresight that the board should take is to actually try to ensure that while you are doing the right things, you also do the right things of the future, not only the right things as they are today. As said, it doesn't matter if those generic things about human rights, labor, environment, or anti-corruption, which are generic to all of us in all companies, are being discussed. It applies throughout to everything. And want to repeat myself to end my short speech here is that the boards in all companies, why don't you take the UN Global Compact, study it really deep, and make sure that you understand the impact of each of those boxes to your business, and you take initiatives that actually positively differentiate you vis-a-vis your competition in each one of those. Thank you very much.
No, thank you so much, Anssi. Now, you have sent us a number of questions on chat as well as from messages. And now we have selected some of those questions, and now we have the opportunity to discuss them with our speakers. So now I would like to invite all of our speakers on stage. Okay, let's start with this one. Maybe Arja, you could start. So how do you communicate about sustainability when you actually don't have a communications team?
Well, the easy answer, of course, would be that you hire a consultant, but I don't think that's the right answer, because what I believe is that communications in the company belongs to everybody. It's not just management, but it's the whole team. But obviously it is the management who needs to create the culture and atmosphere where people feel safe to communicate. And I tried to explain that, when the sustainability is in the heart, and then it is the soul of the company, so then it becomes easy to talk about it for everybody. I mean, you don't need to know the UNs and GRIs and this and that and so on. When you talk about heart, what your company does, that's the best sustainability message there can be.
Right. Thank you. Would you like to add something to this?
But consultants can help.
That's a good addition.
Yeah, I guess you would at least need them to find the right audiences, the channels, the practicalities. But I agree fully that probably it's not the best thing to do to let your communicators communicate your purpose. If business leaders are not credible in just saying this is what I want, not just a section in my company who's telling you the story. Ultimately, I strongly believe that you're only credible if you don't see communication as a way to spin your message into the world, but it's about your company behaviors and your company performance. And that ultimately is what everybody is responsible for in the company.
Yeah, and to me, with the question that you asked, Ella, so if we don't have these communication offices and so on, at least we are pretty safe if we have very good values in the company. So the values, if they are implemented correctly, if we walk the talk, then we are actually doing that, what Arja said. We are good communicators of whatever the company stands for.
And by law, actually, all companies have a communication department. It's the CEO. The CEO is the visible guy that actually represents the company from all of its aspects. And the CEO's message, whether it goes in the company or outside the company, that is the message that the company is delivering. And if that is the right message, then things are good. That's my CEO or my communication department thinking.
Well said.
Very good, very good.
The minimum.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, now maybe about the strategy. So the question is, how do you build sustainability strategy for the company?
Well, I have a great example from Teir, where the management, not a sustainability department and so on, but management by large and the board sort of together really spent time on creating a credible sustainability strategy for an aviation company, which is not an easy task. And it then means that it is also something that has significant impact on your business and its costs and returns and so on. And we had a great dialogue, which by the way then ended up that we also now in our articles on association have one sentence which is related to sustainability. So it is deep in the government soul now as well. But of course, everybody in the company helped on their own side. All functions were involved and they were really excited to be part of that work. So I think that was the best project in my mind because everybody was energized already in the very early phases of creating that strategy.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I believe that, what I said already when I presented my thoughts here, that this UN Global Compact actually serves as the starting point for any size of a company, any industry, any kind of company, because if you take any one of those 17 boxes and you say, okay, my business is this, how is my business influencing this, or how is this aspect influencing my business? And then you actually line up kind of like ideas very soon how your strategy should look like. And actually it then is not just sustainability strategy, but it becomes an inherent part of the strategy.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more, and I think, our presentations this morning are, without having it aligned up front, I have to say to the audience, they really complete each other, because the message here is sustainability strategy. We used to see that as a reporting strategy. It was, there were some requirements, we had to tick the boxes, but you have to embed it in your financial and your business performance strategy, meaning also having the internal assurance mechanisms, setting the right targets and making sure that that operator at the very lowest level knows what to do in order to deliver your strategy, and that you measure it, and that you internally have your targets that you hold people accountable for. If you don't do that, it will fail.
Yeah, I believe very much in kind of doing things. It's what you need to have a strategy and a way forward where you're going. But at the same time, I think it is so important that you actually do those small things every day. And when you look back a little bit, with a little bit of perspective, you see that, well, that was a great strategy. We did these things. It just happened in a way. Because we need to be awake every day. We need to change a little bit every day. We have new information on our table when we wake up. And I admire that kind of doing a lot, that we are adaptive and we really are agile in what we do and think, but that we at the same time are very much awake every day. We do steps forward every day in terms of how we make improvements in our sustainability or in other areas. And I think with that you get an organization that is not just reading the strategy once a year, but they are noticing your small steps every day. And then you get the commitment from the people in your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I second Anssi. I really like the global compact starting point. It really works, and that's how we did it as well. And the one strategy, not separate strategy, is a very important point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and also about how you shouldn't just focus on you and your company alone, but instead how can you collaborate with stakeholders, with other companies, other organizations, to have even bigger impact than just your own measures and your own work. Okay, going forward. Okay, this is a good one. Why do you say that low profile in sustainability matters is a threat? Maybe Arja, you could start.
Well, like I said in my presentation as well, so when the company is not known, so it's a blank canvas, and anybody who will be the first one has then opportunity to paint the picture you want. And like I said, if a hiccup happens and you have to communicate about it, or worse still, you don't communicate but somebody else communicates about it, like we saw in Vastam case. So I'll tell you later on what it was.
I need to know that case.
The company had absolutely no reputation, and then suddenly it was chewed by everybody. And I don't think that there's a lot one could have done there communications-wise in that case. And they did sort of, the whole data security thing, of course, was a total mess, and they should have started from that. But in milder cases, you can defend your company if you sort of build a reputation. So it is the safety platform for you, and you need to take this insurance, and you have to act in time.
And I've seen a lot of evidence in my current role already, but also in my previous role, that, I mean, we all assume that everybody knows our activities, you know. We are a bit blindsided by the the news flows that we read, etc. So you have to assume that there's a little group that knows you very well because they are interested, they're energy informed in our case, etc. And, you know, I read energy articles. This, and they like you, you know, for what you do. They've been reading into it. There's probably a group that doesn't like you that much because of the sector that you're in. It could be energy, it could be something else. But the vast majority in the middle just doesn't know about your existence, you know. And in energy, we saw evidence coming in year on year with the reputation trackers, etc. That people say, "Oh, we didn't know that you were actually doing this in the sustainability areas." And if we had known, we would have liked it and we would have loved it. So the opportunity to convince people of how you're being part of the solution is really out there. I mean, most people, especially younger generations, are agnostic because they have no clue.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, maybe this is for Anssi first, and of course the other ones can afterwards also say their opinions on this, but how would you describe the relationship of government and companies?
It's kind of it's a dependency. The government will not survive without prosperous companies, and also the other way it works, that, you know, if governments are no good, if they don't take care of the market, i.e. a country where they govern, then you don't have the possibility for the companies to operate. So there is this complete symbiosis between the two. And there's also tension, because companies don't necessarily like all the regulation that comes, and governments don't like how companies operate in some ways. And in Finland, of course, the major contention is between our forest industry and the government. And we have the different political parties, who are representing different opinions in all of this. And unfortunately, the end result seems to be so far that it's kind of a lukewarm compromise of something. And we let the forest companies exploit the Finnish nature pretty freely today, which is completely ridiculous. And I'm just hoping myself that higher level of governance from the EU will put some pressure on the Finnish government on this particular issue, and the Finnish forest industry starts to take care of the nature, and not only kind of like in their terms, but in the terms of the nature.
Thank you. So maybe you answered this already, but there is additional question that does the regulation you talked about work right now? Is it working?
I think that to a level that it has made to work, it does. But again, the regulation should much more be about regulating and particularly taxing, because tax is the means that government has monopoly on. And they should use the taxation in a much more creative and better way, with major reform from kind of taxing our income to taxing our consumption. And that is something that is really important, and also kind of directly taxing harm that you do. So those are the two things that you can kind of increase your power on, and then all the regulation actually starts to work better, because that is focusing on the market and not on the individual kind of business or industry area.
Right. Yes, thank you. That was a good answer there. Maybe from a different point of view, to all of you, what do you do when a company has, despite having great strategies and communications activities, but they actually have made a mistake? How can you fix it?
Well, to me, I mean, in that kind of a situation, I think one is really to be open and honest about it, perhaps even very proactive about it, so not sit and wait too long. And I think also in the kind of, let's say, communication and in the messaging part, it's also good to highlight then that like what are the early learnings, what are we going to change here? It was unfortunate what happened, but what are the first steps to correct? So those kind of things come to my mind.
Yeah, I agree with that. I guess also, step one is always to immediately try to assess what the impact is of your mistake on your stakeholders, on individuals. Unfortunately, we see this play out a lot in the cyber security space with data breaches, etc., which is, I mean, a fact of life now. Yeah. So, and then you immediately, what is the vulnerability? How do you close it? How do you protect those people and stakeholders? So immediate action on the incident, I think, is number one. If you make a mistake, and then look at like how do we then follow up? Transparency, absolutely key. Never think I can keep this under the hood and nobody will find out. So be proactive, be caring, and be responding. Be at least I would like to show up as someone who's in control, admitting probably also my part in the mistake and say what the learnings are indeed.
Yeah, as an old basketball player, emphasizing old, is that, in basketball it is that you make a mistake, raise your hand, which means you recognize I made a mistake. Then you have a penalty, you suffer the penalty, and then you do your best to avoid that mistake again. And that's kind of applies to this simple rule also for this aspect very, very clearly.
Excellent.
I have actually one example I just came to my mind and I want to share. I was biking at the time when I worked for Nokia in Lauttasaari, and I was biking home. And I had just left the office building, and from the left came a car behind some bushes, and I smashed into that car. And so I was laying there on the street. First I bumped into the hood and so on, and then the gentleman came out of the car and he looked at me and he said that it was your fault. And well, the lady came out and she was, how are you doing, and so on. But I think this kind of thing, if you make a mistake, that was his reaction. He needed to protect his property, which was the car. Obviously, he was the one that made a little bit of a mistake there. And by the way, when you do something like that, it's interesting how your body reacts, because I felt like nothing harm had happened. I continued biking, and maybe after 1.5 kilometers, my right leg didn't function anymore, because then the shock kind of had dismantled a bit, but nothing seriously happened. But that was a communications lesson for me from the gentleman.
Nothing to add.
Yeah.
Good answer.
You learned the hard way. Yeah. Well, then first, maybe Nebahat. Yeah, this is definitely for you, because this is about Fortum. So Fortum is selling off fossil energy production capacity. Why is this action better for the world as a whole compared to other possibilities, like new investment in cleaning or closing down?
Okay, I understand the question. I think so. If I look at the coal exit picture, because that was one of the significant changes that I shared, that is indeed an exit from coal. It's not selling it off to other parties. And that has been driven by policy and regulations. Like Germany is a very proactive country in saying we want to exit from coal. And we have assets there through Uniper. And it's not an easy journey, right? You have to understand there are jobs involved. These are commercially still very viable activities. So you have to work a scheme with governments, and investors have invested for multiple tens of years into this. And so how do you bring the interest of all stakeholders together and agree the exit and the path of exit? So it sounds easier than it is, but especially the employment impact is one that's very dear to my heart. How do we make sure that we don't make people who work in these old industries the losers of the energy transition? How do we protect them and their families by helping them to transition into the new jobs in the new sectors? So coal is a real exit, and the other part, I spoke about in the heating and cooling divestments that we're doing. We're assessing Poland at the moment, and our consumer-facing business as well. And that's basically, needed to focus our activities, and some of them are very profitable and not in the old industries, but we want to just get indeed the maybe the parts that we see of lesser strategic relevance for the big strategy that I shared to be divested, to generate the cash to indeed invest in the new technologies and the growth in clean power generation.
Yeah, thank you. And the Fortum case is absolutely very inspiring and a good example for.
It's a tough journey, though.
Yeah,
we still have to do a lot.
Yeah, and of course, this transition towards net zero economy is probably the most difficult thing that we ever have to do. We haven't faced that kind of challenge before, but now we are actually committed to it and measuring and going forward and seeing if we are going to the right direction or not. Yes. Now maybe Anssi first, and then of course the other ones can reply as well. So do you expect changing governance practices will increase the responsibility of the board of directors in sustainability questions?
Well, definitely so. There's going to be more regulation. Some of it is going to be of the nature that I like, which I have presented. Some of it is going to be kind of wrong regulation. But whatever it is, the board of directors in the company need to bear the responsibility that you comply with this. And the message is very clear. It's not going to be less, it's going to be more. And already today, like I said, it's too much. You can't cope with that without a lot of help from people of dedication, deep into the processes of the firm in the case of a bigger company, but also in the smaller companies, a little bit depending on what industry they are working on, this is there. So more regulation, more kind of, let's say, threats and opportunities that you need to cope with.
Yeah, and I think what Anssi said earlier in your speech as well, that basically it's too much already to cope just as a board with all the regulation. You need kind of to have help in the organization. And I'm just thinking about growth companies and startups that don't really have that infrastructure in their companies. You are on the board, and most of the energy goes into the next funding round, or when are we going to market with this product, or things like that, very concrete. But the board agenda and the responsibility is so much bigger. So there's a big catch-up work to be done there by many of the boards, and I think it was Anssi, you gave us some homework there on what to read and so on. I think that's a good starting point to really look at what's actually in there from responsibility point of view as a board member.
Now, do you consider that companies have gaps in organization capability to combine this business model development with sustainability targets? Is there gaps that we should try to fix?
Well, the easy answer is there are always gaps. And interestingly, having been through a couple of really big reorganizations that were driven by external factors, as we now speak about the ever-changing pressures from all stakeholders, as I said, to put your money where your mouth is and to actually have impact. It is, people start with, I need a strategy. And then, of course, it comes quite often as an afterthought. So what organizational conditions do I need to then deliver that strategy? And I think, if we have to think more upfront about what are the capabilities, the knowledge, the expertise that we need to get things done. And it's not an easy thing. This is really HR space, but and then changing your organization towards one that will deliver what you want to be delivered. That's a science. So getting that right is probably the $1 million question for many companies.
Yeah, it's like I was about to say some of the same that you said. That it's basically so that gaps are all the time. They never go away because everything all the time, everywhere, can be made better. That's how things are done in humankind, and sometimes progressing things like equality or diversity in companies means that you need to kind of exercise positive discrimination. Positive and discriminate. How do you put those two things together? But sometimes you need to do actions like this in order to close the gap and get rid of it.
Quotas and so on.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity, if I may.
It is.
So people always see it as a difficult task. You have to let go of people. How do you have tough conversations? How do you change your model, etc. But if you see it as an opportunity and pledge to treat your people with care, and make sure that indeed they are helped to different roles outside of the organization, etc. There's no reason why you should wait.
Yeah. Absolutely, and this HR perspective is crucial in this sustainability discussion. And from Greenstep perspective, we are lucky to have an excellent HR services team that is also focusing on social sustainability areas. Yeah, but it is crucial. Okay, maybe could you mention a couple of companies that are good in foresight thinking that Anssi talked about?
Well, I can name one where I happen to be chairman of the board. And that is Elisa Corporation, which I think is a shining example. It was the first telecom operator that became carbon neutral, and overall, if you look at our reporting that we've done over the years and so forth, definitely I think that Elisa can set an example for many public companies to compare with.
How about others? Would you like to mention some?
Well, I'd like just to go with some smaller companies, because I think that's also very important that we get the startups to really act and to also that fresh money flows into things. And I mentioned a couple of companies in my very early start, and I think when the agenda actually of the company is to combine hard business with making something that is good and sustainable, then you kind of get that kind of a reputationable company. And I mentioned, for example, how to innovate bike service, which seems to be like, okay, how can you do that so much better that becomes a viable new business? But there's so much in the back end, there's so much in the whole ecosystem about it, how the product flows on the spare parts and how you work together with the main bike brands, how you make the aftermarket work for them. They never had an aftermarket, those bike brands. So there's a totally new market that you can build. And at the same time, you are making a huge impact on the environment and helping people to have a better life even. And I think going with that kind of a thinking, which was the case in Jepli from the very start when we started to fuel some gas into the tank with some money for them. And it has just grown. The company has a strong vision to make life better on this planet. And I'm so proud of that small team. So that's one example.
Yeah, that was a good example. And
a good example, in my opinion, also is a kind of a small startup kind of business which has very high ambitions, is the Finnish company for refurbished iPhones.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So in Swappy,
Swappy,
I think that they have an excellent business idea where things that many of us consider it was like last year's model, give me the new one. Right. They refurbish it and sell it to somebody who is satisfied with it.
It's absolutely fantastic thing. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there are many good examples. I think this underlines also and your examples both actually underlines the importance of indeed venture capital, and that big companies, and Fortum is investing in this as well. So because there are disruptive technologies and immense possibilities that we don't even know of. So how do you invest in those parties and those companies who are indeed going after what it is that our brains won't even take us there because we're modeled to think in the traditional ways. Yeah? So how do you bring that in-house? How do you make sure that you put some money in that innovation while you help young companies?
Yeah.
One thing that came to my mind when you talked about startups and then about this regulation. So at the same time, I think we need to be very careful that the regulation doesn't get so extensive that it sort of chokes the startup. So we need to give an opportunity for the newcomers to start their business as well. And of course they need to be regulated, but maybe it could be sort of like stepwise then regulated.
Okay. Well, let's see. Well, maybe this could be our last question for today. What is the key challenge of sustainability communications today in Finland?
There are so many challenges, I think, but there are great opportunities, and I would like to focus rather on those. I mean, we all have our own challenges, but we have a great opportunity to get people on board and get the buy-in to all the sustainability activities, and not just sort of like to change their own personal life. Like Anssi was saying, I mean, we should maybe change taxation and tax consumption. And that will never be easy. So people need to understand why we do these things, and I say that communications is a great opportunity for the society as a whole, and making things happen.
But even going much, like say, to much more like beginning of sustainability, I met with a company some months ago. We were in a group discussion with several growth companies, and one person, one owner of a company said that he doesn't really know, and I think nothing wrong in that he kind of just confessed that he doesn't really know what to do. I mean, sustainability, I understand it's important, but I don't know what to do in my company with this. So I think, and I'm so sure about that there are many companies in Finland and abroad, all over, that have the same feeling a little bit, that yeah, there's something important here, but you know, we have it on the board agenda once a year or whatever, and we talk nice things, but then it's like Nebahat, you said that so many companies have this on their promise to do, but then what do they do as actions? So I think we just need to kind of, let's say, demystify many of these things and help with just small examples on where to start, what can we do, start the journey, and help each other as companies, and then in that way make progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe to start with the materiality, like what is material for that company? What are the stakeholder expectations for sustainability, and what are the biggest impacts along the value chain? There you can start.
Yeah.
Perhaps the problem is that, you know, under the umbrella of sustainability, we have issues that have, let's say, in my books at least, a little bit different pecking order. You have things like, you know, existential to mankind or this planet. And then you have things that deal with kind of human interaction, which to me are kind of secondary. They are not existential, they are important, but they are not existential. And, you know, I personally think that in our communications, you know, in general, everywhere, we kind of have good importance now on existential climate crisis, yes. But I think that even more important than that is biodiversity and, you know, the nature in general. Because, you know, we the humans, we are just, you know, one part of this system. There are other systems. And if you do something good for biodiversity, it automatically is something good for the climate as well. So, you know, it's kind of in this. But those two headlines to me are like, they are here, and all the other things are of lesser importance because they deal much more with humanity and human issues. But this deals really with the existence of the whole planet.
I couldn't agree more. And I want to go back to what I said in my presentation about, well, one of the reasons why I was attracted to moving to Finland. And it is, I think the challenge is really, I mean, you guys are seriously underselling one of your biggest strengths, which is, it is subsistence to the Finns and the Nordics to deal with nature, to respect nature, and to not harm it, right? So, and you have been looking for and finding that balance, not because any regulator forced you to do so, but because, as Ulla in my team, my VP Sustainability said, she looked at me, she said, it wasn't by design, this is who we are. This is who we are. Generations of Finns have done it this way and want it to be done this way. And I was like, all right, I need to learn more about this because the rest of the world is trying to, find that balance. And you guys have been doing it for ages. There's a cultural thing about, we don't brag about things, we just do it, which I kind of like, but where Finland is today and bragging, it's a long way. So we can find a middle way there and just promote it a little bit more.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for the lively discussion. And we can continue the discussion also after this event in Greenstep blog and on LinkedIn. Now our live stream is coming to an end, and I want to thank all of you for joining us. And we hope that you have gained new perspectives and food for thought from this morning. We are eager to support you in the path of transition and sustainability brings us the future. So thank you, and hope to meet you face to face very soon.